I feel an emotion about the Cincinnati Bengals that I have not felt since January 9th, 2016. I'm at a loss for words. I thought this part of my life was over, but here we are. I am angry. I am pissed off. All right, let's get started. I want to get right into it. NFL free agency is underway. It's the reason why this podcast is a couple of days late. I'm recording this on Thursday morning. I'm releasing it on Thursday morning. Legal tampering in the NFL became a thing on Monday at noon. The new league year began yesterday at 4 p.m., which was Wednesday at 4 p.m. And basically, this is the offseason. The free agency period has started. A bunch of free agents have signed. Most of the top available free agents have already signed with their teams or whoever their new team would be. And there's a bunch of trades that have happened and so on and so forth. And the first time I came back to this podcast and did an episode about the Bengals, I said that this was the most important offseason in the history of the franchise. And everybody I talked to seemed to agree with that sentiment, A, and B, have confidence that the Bengals would do the right things to adequately approach this offseason. And why is it the most important offseason in team history? Well, it's quite simple. Jamar Chase has a contract situation going, and he's not happy with it, and he's due for an extension. T. Higgins is about to be has been franchise tagged for the second consecutive year. He wants an extension. Trey Hendrickson was given permission to seek a trade. He wants a contract extension. And oh, by the way, you had a healthy Joe Burrow who played an MVP level and a Triple Crown winner in Jamar Chase, and the NFL sack leader in Trey Hendrickson, and you missed the playoffs. So clearly you have a good team, you have really good players, and you have a Super Bowl window that is supposed to be open, right? You have an opportunity to make your team better so that you will have a chance to win the Super Bowl in the Joe Burrow era. That's what this offseason is all about. It's about creating a belief and a trust for your fan base and for your players in you, in the organization, that they have what's best for the players and the fan base in mind. It's about creating an opportunity, truthfully, to bring a Lombardi trophy to Cincinnati. I know there are some people that are already shaking their head at that, but with Joe Burrow, for the first time, it's actually a possibility. Hell, they were 3 plays away from one just a couple of years ago. And so all these reasons, it is the most important offseason in the history of the Bengals. And I have repeatedly defended the Bengals against the allegations that they don't care about winning. I've repeatedly said that they do care about winning, but they have to do a better job of changing. I've also said multiple times that they've changed, and I do believe that. But this week and the last 2 weeks has me doubting even myself, has me doubting the arguments that I've made, has me doubting the times that I've defended them, because there's nothing about what they've done that makes sense. And I'm starting to worry. I'm looking at the panic button. I'm about to press it because this is not where it's supposed to be. Let's start with the big 3. Chase, Higgins, and Hendrickson. Let's just start there, okay? Jamar Chase, I do believe that extension will get done. But I think the Bengals foolishly came back to the table with Jamar at the same rate that they left off last year. Well, you can't do that because Jamar just had one of the best seasons a wide receiver's ever had in the history of the NFL. He's going to want $40 million plus. On top of that, at the scouting combine, both Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor, clips you heard on this podcast last week, said that they are going to make, and they are prepared to make, Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League. They said that. Duke Tobin also said it to Kelsey Conway from the Cincinnati Enquirer. He also said it to Jeff Hobson from Bengals.com. 3-4 times a Bengals figure has publicly said we are going to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League. Fantastic. That's great. What are you waiting on? Because now Myles Garrett, who I've lost a lot of respect for, by the way, Myles Garrett, who said, I don't want to play in Cleveland anymore. I want to compete for a championship, so on and so forth. That's all I care about is winning. It's not about getting to Canton. It's about winning championships. That's what Myles Garrett said. And then the Browns were like, okay, well, we're not going to trade you, but we'll give you $40 million. And Myles is like, okay. And he's going to stay in Cleveland. That, I think, is weak from Myles Garrett, which sucks because I like Myles. But they made Myles Garrett the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League. So what does that do? Number one, it drives up the price for Jamar Chase. And number two, Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson is a defensive end, plays the same position as Myles Garrett, beat him out for the sack lead this year in the National Football League. Hendrickson probably wants somewhere in the $30 to $33 million range. Well, after a gigantic extension from Max Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders, and now Myles Garrett getting this ginormous contract extension, the price just went up. Who was it? I believe it was Fat Joe who famously said yesterday's price is not today's price. Well, now that applies to both Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson. The Bengals have been penalized now twice for waiting to get these deals done. Now, with Hendrickson, it's interesting. I think the biggest thing we've learned about Trey Hendrickson over the last couple of years is that he has a crappy agent. That's my guess. So Trey and his people go in to Cincinnati and they meet with ownership and they meet with Duke Tobin and the whole 9 yards. And they say, hey, you guys are not close to what I want on an average per year basis or a total amount of money or a guaranteed amount, whatever it is. You guys aren't close. So I know that the market out there is booming for defensive ends. Please let me go seek a trade that will get you guys something in return and get me what I want, which is money. And the Bengals say, okay, if you can get us a good return, you're welcome to go seek a trade. And apparently there are reports out there that Hendrickson's camp told the Bengals they could fetch a first-round pick for him. They can't. I don't see that happening. They're not going to. There is no team in the NFL that is going to give the Bengals a first-round pick and give Trey Hendrickson an extension of $35 million plus. Now, from what I've been told, there were reports out there. I believe Mike Dardis of Channel 5 here in Cincinnati said that Trey Hendrickson was offered between $30 and $32 million. I've been told that was never the case. I don't think it's going to require much more than 30 to get Trey Hendrickson to stay in Cincinnati, but there is a belief that the Bengals are in the mid to low 20s on that offer. I would say that's a little bit insulting to Trey Hendrickson, but not as much as some people would think. I would not pay more than 32. I would not pay more than 30, to be honest. I would not pay more than $30 million a year average salary for Trey Hendrickson. Okay, and I'm thinking of this through the lens of how the Bengals do contracts. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But there is in no world that I believe Trey Hendrickson is worth more than $30 million a year. Let me tell you why. He's about to be 31 years old at the end of next season. Yeah, he had 17 and a half sacks last year, led the NFL. He deserves credit for that. His pass rush win rate is among the best in the National Football League. He consistently wins. Here's the problem. There are times when he disappears. He had 7.5 of his 17.5 sacks in 2 games this year. 3 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, 4 against the Las Vegas Raiders, both of those against backup tackles. And then against the Philadelphia Eagles, who has a really good offensive line, he was going up against a backup tackle in Fred Johnson and got shut down. Trey is basically non-existent in the run game, a 65.9 PFF grade in the run game this year. He only had 33 tackles. When you think about 17 and a half sacks, half of those tackles were his sacks. He's not great in tackles for loss. He's not great in the run game. He only plays one spot on the defensive line. He does not move around. And he played 72.5% of the snaps this year. All of that to me says this is a very good player that can be helpful to any team, but it's not a player who's worth upwards of $30 million and a first-round pick. And I think other teams across the NFL see that as well. So now what the Bengals have done is say, yeah, if you can go bring that back to us, we'll be happy to do that. Well, they can't figure that out. They can't find anyone willing to do it. Even though the market went up with the Crosby and Garrett deals, Hendrickson's still struggling to find someone who will give the Bengals what they told him to go get. And so now that brings the leverage back to Cincinnati to say, okay, well, you can't deliver what you told us. You are under contract this year, and we already gave you a raise once during the life of this contract, an extension during the life of this contract. What if you just play it out this season? That's my guess as to what's going to happen. Then let's go down to T. Higgins. Higgins, it would have been nice to get all of this done ahead of free agency so that there was some sort of, plan or understanding or a little bit more of an understanding of how you can go after different players in free agency, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and so on. Well, it's not. It doesn't really affect them that much. The Bengals still have north of $30 million in cap space that they can spend. But this continues to be a distraction that Higgins apparently is not close to signing an extension. Hendrickson is kind of out there in no man's land, and Chase is not close to signing an extension either. So the three biggest parts of your team, the three biggest parts of your offseason, the guys that Joe Burrow has repeatedly asked for the Bengals to bring back, well, their situations are still unresolved. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you can look at it this way. Hendrickson, Higgins, and Chase are all under contract for 2025. They are Cincinnati Bengals at the moment. There is right now no fear that they aren't going to play. Higgins, I don't think, will like to play on the tag. And until I see otherwise, I think the Bengals are going to try to make him do that. I don't think that's a good decision. Jamar Chase, I think this is going to drag into training camp. I think it's going to be a distraction. I think that's a bad thing for the Bengals. And Trey Hendrickson, I think the Bengals are going to try to make him play on his current deal. And I think he's going to hate it, but I think he'll eventually succumb and show up. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, why would I think this is going to happen after the last several years of being incredibly complimentary of this team and believing in the way that they approach the offseason and the way that they are trying to build it? Well, they've had success. And for the last 5 years, they have been players in free agency. They have been active. They have been smart. They have built their team in free agency. The problem is they haven't drafted very well. And now, because Joe Burrow is about to have a huge contract and Higgins and Chase and Higgins and Hendrickson are all dealing with these contracts, it seems like the Bengals have gone, man, that sucks. We can't be as active. We can't be as progressive in free agency as we were in years past because we've got to pay these other guys. First of all, that's a lie. It's nonsense. They have the cap space. They don't have a bunch of guys under contract moving forward. There is zero excuse for them not to get the deals done with the big three, number one, and not to still be proactive in free agency to fix their team. And here's what really pisses me off is that 2 weeks ago at the scouting combine and the clips that you heard on this podcast, Duke Tobin was passionate. He was pointed. He was focused. He was energetic. He said all the right things. He said that it does not sit well with us, that we did not make the playoffs last year, and the way that we lost games, that is not acceptable, and we will use every resource we have to improve our roster. Those were his words. He was going to leave no stone unturned when it comes to building this team and fixing the roster so that they can be better in 2025. It had me fired up. I have never heard a Bengals executive talk like that. And it was like, okay, they are understanding just how important this offseason is, and they're going to do something about it. Well, a couple of hours later, T. Higgins says the cap emoji. We talked about this last week, and that to me was the first alarm bell. Then we get to free agency, and as of Thursday morning at 8:44 a.m., the Bengals have added 3 external players. 3 who were not on this team last year. You want to know another thing Duke Tobin said at the combine? He said, quote, "I don't want to pay more money for the same team as last year." Well, right now, the signings that they've made are a running back in Samaje Perine. Well, guess what? He's a former Bengal, so I don't even know if I count that as an external signing. A nose tackle in TJ Slayton. Okay, I'm all right with that. TJ Slayton, a former Green Bay Packer, very good run defender. That's good. That's a solid move. It will help bolster your defensive line. And they signed Oren Burks, a linebacker, good run defender from the Philadelphia Eagles. Those three guys don't move the needle. Those three guys don't take you from 9-8 to 12-4. They don't take you from 9-8 to 13-4 or whatever it is. 12-5, 13-4, whatever. I don't know how many games they play in the NFL these days. Those moves don't move the needle. Not good enough. Not good enough whatsoever. And it just bothers me that we are at this point begging for the Bengals to once again sign free agents that will be helpful to this organization. And the last couple of days, with basically nothing happening for this team and them not doing anything like they said they were going to do, and you see the deals that are signed across the NFL, guys that could help this team for cheap numbers, it makes you wonder, what exactly are they doing? And what exactly is their plan? Because you heard everything came out the right way from Duke and Zach at the Combine. But as we said last week, their actions are not reflecting their words. And so when you look at the way things have been with this team, over the last several years, I mentioned that they were active in free agency. The type of player that they've gone after in free agency are guys that are kind of looking for prove-it opportunities, trying to stick around in the National Football League, maybe coming off of an injury, mid-level, tier 2 type of guys who are not the big name, big money free agents, but guys that can help the team maybe in the short term and then reach back into free agency and go get paid. Those are the guys that the Bengals have been going after. There's no problem with that. They've had success with that. Guys like DJ Reader, Mike Hilton, Von Bell, Larry Ogunjobi. Trey Hendrickson was one of those guys, the greatest free agent signing in Bengals history. You know, Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, who is beloved in this city and become a Bengals legend. Those types of players, there's a spot for them. Like, that's good. That is smart roster building by the Bengals. But you put yourself in a difficult position when you don't take care of the elite players on your roster. When you wait it out for whatever reason, I don't know what they are afraid of. They could have signed Jesse Bates for much cheaper, and he'd be playing right now, the best safety in the NFL, and he'd be a bargain. They could have signed Jamar Chase for much, much cheaper than what he's going to be. They could have signed T. Higgins for much, much cheaper than what he's going to be. But for some reason, they are afraid. Most people say it's because of guaranteeing money in the second year and beyond of a contract. The only time they've ever really done that is with Orlando Brown Jr. and Joe Burrow. And oh, by the way, Orlando Brown Jr., the biggest free agent they've had probably in the last 10 years, he sought the Bengals out. They weren't even trying. He came to them. What's that say about this team? Anyways, so if you can't get out ahead of things and pay the players that you know are great right away, you are going to then cost more money down the line. That's what we're seeing with Higgins. That's what we're seeing with Hendrickson. That's what we're seeing with Chase. These all could have been taken care of already, and the Bengals would have even more space than they thought they would have to be able to improve the roster. That's how Super Bowl windows are built. That's how you do this. That's how you win a Super Bowl. And one thing that keeps getting brought up with this organization is that they are cheap. They're not cheap. They're incompetent. How can you be labeled cheap if all you ever do is end up paying more money for your great players? The way that they approach roster building and the way that they approach construction and the way that they approach contract structure, the way that they do those things is completely detrimental to the ultimate goal. I tweeted about it this week at Auty Elmore. And I said that the Bengals' approach to roster building and contract structuring is inefficient and incompetent. It requires them to heavily depend on development, health, and luck to win a Super Bowl. So again, you can't be labeled cheap if you ultimately are paying more for your great players willingly because you won't guarantee them money beyond year one. You then cost yourself a lot more money down the line and make it harder on yourself to build around those great players. That's not being cheap, that's being incompetent. And the problem here, I think, is, every time it's been brought up in the NFL for an opportunity to modernize the financial structure of the league with player contracts, with salary caps, with anything, 31 teams vote yes and one team votes no. You know who that team is? It's the Bengals. Why do they do that? What are they afraid of? Is it worrying about Greg Cook? And is it PTSD from Greg Cook, this great star quarterback who got hurt and was never the same? Is it worrying about Sheldon Rankins, guys like that who you paid a little bit of money to, and then he developed this terrible sickness and you had to cut him loose? Well, listen, if you pay your players early, you are allowed to take more risks. It allows you to take more risks on Sheldon Rankins type of players without it hurting you as much as it does now. They are completely clueless onto how to actually build this roster. And the problem that I struggle with the most is that I think they think this is the right way to do it. It doesn't matter if they look around across the National Football League and see the way the Philadelphia Eagles structure contracts, or the Kansas City Chiefs structure contracts, or the Baltimore Ravens, or the Houston Texans, or whoever it might be, the San Francisco 49ers. They look around at all that and still think that they are doing it the right way. And yet they've got 3 unhappy players, an unhappy quarterback, a probably pissed off coaching staff, a fan base that I've never seen this angry before, and you're squeezing dry this belief that hope and competency has actually taken hold of this franchise. What does that do? Like, if I've said this before, I cannot settle for anything other than an aggressive pursuit of a championship. That is what you've got to be doing. Aggressive pursuit to championship means being able to evolve, being able to do things differently, being able to take risks, being able to take chances, and also being proactive in securing the best players. We knew from game 1 that Jamar Chase was going to be a monster. Get the deal done as soon as possible. And my guy Mo Egger used this as an example on ESPN 1530 this week. Look what the Cincinnati Reds did with Hunter Green. He's locked up on an extension that's good for him and good for the team. He's one of the best pitchers in baseball. He got Cy Young votes last year. He's going to be the 80th something paid highest paid pitcher in baseball this year. He is the best bargain in baseball. It's hard for me to fathom that they don't know what they're doing is wrong, and that they don't look at it and say, gosh, we could have saved ourselves a lot of money. It blows my mind. Pay your great players when you know they are great, get them extended early, and create more flexibility across the roster. If you want to build your team the way that they've been building it, with the Sheldon Rankins and the DJ Readers and the Mike Hiltons and the Von Bells and the Alex Kappas and so on, if you want to take chances on those guys, you can still build your roster that way if you pay your great players early. Because you know they're great. You know they're young. It doesn't matter if there's more guaranteed money beyond the first year. And it also sends a message to the rest of the National Football League that I don't want to be a Cincinnati Bengal because they're not going to take care of me if I'm great. If I'm an agent right now with one of the best players in college football, a guy that I really think is going to be great, or let's say the Bengals suck and they're in the top 5 next year and they're on the verge of getting another Jamar Chase, if I'm that player's agent, what would stop me from saying, hey, Bengals, we appreciate you, but we don't want to be here. We are not going to negotiate with you because we don't believe in the way that you structure contracts. It's pissing me off because there's a real opportunity here to win a championship. That's what it's supposed to be. And I feel hoodwinked, bamboozled, whatever you want to call it, because I believed every word that Duke Tobin said for about 6 hours till T. Higgins said it was bullshit. But it felt like, okay, finally, it's clicked for them. They get it. They understand now, finally. And then the way that they have approached free agency, they have no good guards. None. They re-signed Cody Ford. That's cool. He's not a starting guard in the NFL. They still have Cordell Volson, who was like statistically the worst guard in the NFL last year. Like, there's no starting guards. Can you get the ball to Chase and Higgins if Joe Burrow's on his back? And oh, by the way, this is Joe Burrow who has already missed chunks of 2 seasons due to injury because you failed to protect him, because you wouldn't invest in the offensive line sooner. Yesterday, I spent 5 hours on Twitter. I watched podcasts, I watched videos, I watched the news, I read articles. I have not felt this way about this team. I have not been this pissed off about this organization since January 9th, 2016, when they lost that playoff game to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've said it before. That moment changed the way I view sports. It really did. And I never allowed it to consume me anymore. I would never get upset. I wouldn't get mad, maybe for an hour after a game if they lost, whatever. But then I'd move on with my life. And now I don't know what it is, but I'm furious about this. And I can't shake it, and I can't stop thinking about it, and I can't stop trying to find the solutions to it. It's driving me insane. And I don't know if it's now because their success is attached to my livelihood. Maybe that's the reason. And I look at it and think, you're going to make my life harder. You're going to take money out of my pocket if you suck moving forward. People don't understand this. When the Bengals are good, that's good for us. It's good for what I do. It's good for my bottom line. It helps me. When they're bad, it sucks for everybody. You know, Mo always says, be good or be interesting. And sometimes bad is interesting. And right now, the Bengals are interesting. But I don't want them to be bad again. Nobody wants them to be bad again. And here's the thing. Here's what nobody seems to know. How's Joe Burrow going to handle all this? How is Joe Burrow going to handle all this? He has quietly, rather kindly, subtly put pressure on the organization to fix all these issues, to take care of their guys and build a winning team around him. What happens if they don't? What happens if they try to make T. Higgins play on the franchise tag and he sits out? What happens if they don't get an extension done with Jamar Chase and he doesn't practice again? What happens if they trade Trey Hendrickson and sure, they get another pick, but they've added nobody on the edge to help the defense? Then what happens? You know, a lot of people want to draw the comparison to Carson Palmer. And Carson, it didn't go well at the end for him. And he was not happy. And he left a trail on the way out, but he was still pretty nice about it. I'll tell you one thing. I don't know Joe Burrow, but I know some people around him. And I can tell you one thing about Joe Burrow. If the Bengals screw this up, he will not go quietly into the night. He will go nuclear on this organization, and he should. I've said it before, it would be organizational suicide if they screw this whole thing up. It's amazing to think that we have reached this point and they have yet to figure it out. And yet they're not cheap. And here's another narrative that I want to die because it is complete fabrication of truth. It is a lie. The Bengals do not have a money issue. They are owners of an NFL franchise that makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Mike Brown is one of the 400 richest people in America. And that's not just the football stuff. There is no cash money. Struggling here. There is not a cash problem. There is not a money problem. There's not an escrow problem. There's not a liquidity problem. None of that. There are no issues with the Bengals financials. None. You can never let an NFL team or an owner tell you they're poor. The Bengals haven't said they're poor. The Bengals haven't acted like they're poor. But for some reason, there's a belief that the Bengals are poor and that the Bengals can't afford all this deal. That is nonsense. It's a lie. Do not believe it. I think the next time Burrow talks is in April. They all come together then for some practices and stuff. I mean, who knows what's going to look like by then. A lot of people seem confident this would all get done. And here we are, basically nothing. I'm going to check my phone, see if I've missed anything while I've been rambling over the last little bit. Maybe they signed everybody that they were supposed to sign. But I don't see that has happened. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. You can follow me on Instagram as well, at Auty Elmore on there as well. And you can follow me on TikTok. I've been posting a lot of TikToks lately. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, maybe on the next episode, about like my social media strategy right now and some things, and kind of connected to the conversation about the Bengals being connected to my livelihood. We'll get into some deep waters with that. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that I've missed? Anything else that's really honking me off? This team right now has failed to protect Joe Burrow with an adequate set of guards. They have failed to add to their pass rush. They have failed to sign their three biggest players. And they are the laughingstock of the NFL right now. They are not cheap. They are incompetent. And that's dangerous. That is very, very dangerous. There's a lot of things teetering for this franchise right now. I know that people are not renewing their season tickets. I know that there is a lack of trust in the front office after the first few days of this. I know that there's a lot going on with the stadium lease situation that doesn't look like good news for the Bengals. We're supposed to hear from Katie Blackburn, the executive vice president, the daughter of Mike Brown, in a couple of weeks for the NFL owners meetings in Florida. We'll see if she talks. They rarely speak to the media. They rarely speak to anybody. But I feel like a lot of Bengals fans are owed an explanation. I really feel that way. And nothing about the way that they have acted makes any sense. It's bothersome to me. It's really, really bothersome to me. Even if they signed Hendrickson and Higgins and Chase today, they're still basically the same team from a year ago. They haven't made their team better in any way, shape, or form. They did bring Mike Gesicki back and gave him nice money, and brought BJ Hill back and gave him nice money. That's good. Those are shoe-ins. Those are deals you're supposed to make. I hate feeling this way. I hate being mad. I hate being pissed off. It drives me nuts that we've reached this point. I did ask for questions on my Instagram, and I did it a little bit late, so I didn't get a lot of them. So let's answer two real quick. The first one is Clayton. Clayton wants to know, what is the most underrated signing of a returning player so far for the Bengals? My answer to that would be Cam Sample. They signed Cam Sample late last night, and Cam missed all of last season with I believe it was a torn Achilles. Prior to that, he was one of their better run defenders. He played inside. He played outside. He was an ascending young player for them and a really good run defender. Duke has talked openly about the fact that they want to fix the run defense. Well, so far, the signings of Oren Burks and TJ Slayton would suggest they're committed to doing that. And then, to me, re-signing Cam Sample, who hopefully takes a step forward as a pass rusher, but also can be a flexible guy on that defense who can do multiple things, including stop the run, I think that's going to be a really impactful signing. Definitely the most underrated. Eric wants to know LeBron versus Jordan. Jordan, and also this isn't that type of show, so don't ask those questions. All right, that does it for me. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me weekdays noon to 3, ESPN 1530. I know I'm going to finish this and think of something that I wanted to say. So I'll probably be pouting or spouting off on Twitter at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. Name of the show on ESPN 1530 is called Cincy 360. You can listen to it anywhere on the iHeartRadio app, just like you can get this podcast anywhere, including the iHeartRadio app. Again, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and more as well. Next week, we'll get into the weeds and some deeper stuff, and we'll start looking towards some draft players and all that. But I want to know what you think, man, because I hate this feeling. This part of my life was supposed to be over, and yet here I am, as Jeff Brantley would say, madder than a wet hornet. I don't like that. All right, that does it for me. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. As always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.